Okay, part two. Cut me off in the middle of this interview. So in Arizona, I was working at this job for a tennis tour company. I was going to the gym during my lunch break, and after work, I was going to the library frequently every week, sometimes multiple times a week, reading a ton of books. I was participating in the LDS church and in weekday activities with the church, like Institute, which is like Sunday school during the week, and other like young adult activities to get people together. And also I was taking a French class, learning another language, and I had good roommates, and it was just going really well for me. And then I had a coworker who was also my boss, and it was just the two of us, and there was sometimes a third person who would work with us, but mostly it was just the two of us, and we talked all the time. And he was Christian. I think he was maybe Lutheran. Sounds like he was Lutheran, but I can't quite remember. And his wife had dated an LDS guy when she was a teenager, and they had like a bad experience. She had a bad experience with his dad, who was a leader. And so he was kind of like, yeah, my wife doesn't really like the Mormons because of this. But he and I talked all the time about religion, Mormonism, blah, blah, blah. And at that point, I was so convinced, like, yeah, if you just teach people what we believe, then everyone will believe that. Because that had been my life at that point from 2007 until like 2012. And so for me, it was like, well, yeah, I was surrounded by Mormons all the time, and this is just what happens. You teach them the truth, and then they'll accept it. And what I realized later was, like, he was a really good person. His wife and children were really good people, and they didn't believe it. And it just kind of was, like, surprising to me, like, wait, you're not going to just believe what I believe? You're not going to just accept what I believe and what I know is right? And it made me question a little bit, like, wow, like, that's so weird. I've always been taught A plus B equals C. Like, you learn, like, you're good, you're going to learn this, and then you're going to do this. And when it didn't follow that pattern, I was kind of just confused, like, wonder why that happened. And it made me reconsider, like, the extremes in my religion. Like, this is the only way, this is the one true thing. And also this is the only way to happiness. Because I was really happy when I was doing all those things in the church, but I was also just living a really good life. And so when I looked at it from that perspective, like, are these just good people and that's why they're happy? Like, how can they be happy without the things that I know? And I slowly began to think more and more about that. And then I realized, after working there for 2 years, I realized I had to go see the world. Like, I'd already lived in South America for 1.5 years. I forgot to mention my mission was in Chile, where I learned Spanish. And I had to go see the world. I had to go see, like, what other people were like. Like, this one person was good, didn't believe what I believed, and was still happy. And that was against kind of the idea that I had had at church. I'm not going to say, like, what they taught me, because I don't know if that was just something I picked up on my own, or if I don't know. But I wanted to go see the world, so I decided I was going to go back to South America, and I decided I wanted to do a 6-month backpacking trip. So let's see. I don't know why she's crying. So, 6-month backpacking trip to, I went to Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Brazil, and then I flew from Brazil up to Ireland, Scotland, France, and England, and then I flew from England back to the United States. And during that 6 months, like, I really opened my eyes to, like, the rest of the world, and it made me a bit cynical, and I got a little bit depressed, like, the world wasn't what I had thought it was, and I had been so wrapped up in my beliefs, or trying to prove to myself that what I believed or wanted to believe was true, that when I got to South America and I saw the things, I was like, I don't know. I was back to that, like, I really don't know what's true. I don't know what's right. I don't know what I believe. And I came to some really good conclusions on that trip, and realized, like, some good, some bad about my religion. And I don't know, like, I came out after that, like, more open-minded still, less sure, but more also convinced that I would still know what was right if I followed my conscience and followed what I thought was true. So I came back from that trip in, I think it was the end of February. It was like the very end of February. And I flew back to see my family in Idaho. And one of my friends from Utah messaged me and she was like, hey, you gotta meet my friend in Idaho while you're up there. Go on a date with him. And I was like, okay. So I went on a date with Cody, and instead of moving back to Arizona, I decided to stay in Idaho and see how things went, because I really liked Cody. I thought he was a really good person. And the funny thing about it is that I'd always had this thing, like I always said to my family, I will marry someone from anywhere in the United States except Idaho. I hated Idaho. And I had so many negative thoughts about Idaho, which I'm not going to go into at this point. Just from living there in high school, I just did not want to marry someone from Idaho. But I married someone from Idaho. I stayed in Idaho with Cody. We went down to Arizona, got all my stuff, moved back to Idaho, and then so I got home the end of February. 2 weeks later I met Cody, and then moved everything back up from Arizona back up to Idaho, and then we got engaged in June, and then we got married in October. So it was really fast after my trip, but I had no doubt. I knew it was right. I knew he was the person for me. Like, it just clicked, and I knew that was just where I was supposed to be. I have something in my eye. I just knew that was where I was supposed to be. It was what I wanted, and I went for it, and I married him, and I'm so glad I did. However, back to the religion stuff. When I was dating Cody, I told him about all my stuff, like about, I don't know if this is true. I've doubted and wondered and not known for, at that point in 2014, at that point it had been 10 years since I got to BYU, and like 7 years since I had gone on my mission, 6 years since I had started believing in God, and I think about 2 years since I had moved to Arizona. So he had known about all those things, all my questions, all my doubts. We talked about everything. And I'm not going to share his story because that's not my place, but I will say that we both agreed that it was still my journey. It didn't affect our relationship. We both felt like we wanted to be together despite any unsurety or whatever else. And we got married. And at that time, I didn't know if I wanted to get married in the LDS temple or not, solely based on my, I don't want to say disbelief, but unsurety. Like, I didn't know if I wanted to commit to the church in that way and get married in the temple, those fancy castle-like buildings. She keeps waking up. She is mad. I wonder if Cody's gonna bring her to me. I'm gonna go get her if he doesn't. So I didn't know if I wanted to get married in the temple, but I decided at the end I was gonna do it for Cody. Like, I had never done anything to like disqualify me from getting married in the temple. Like, there's certain rules and stuff you have to do to be able to get married there. And I always lived still like a really strict, like self-disciplined kind of life. Never drank alcohol, never did drugs, never even really swore. Like, I just lived a very like sterile life. And so I decided to get married in the temple for Cody because it's something he'd always wanted, and he was a bit more believing than me. Oh, Zoe. One moment.